financial independence, retire early?
It's about people giving themselves the option to be able to retire much earlier than would be the traditional retirement age, but doing it through what some might call pain.
I would describe myself more of a financial tortoise than a financial hare. I'm going to just plod along with my plan.
I mean, it's appealing, isn't it, right? We all, there's a common aspiration to be able to retire early.
Actually, I quite like to enjoy some of my life as well and not just be miserable while I get to 45. One of the most powerful things an investor or anybody can have really is when they've got time on their side.
It certainly gets harder as you get older, doesn't it? Because you lose that, the power of compounding.
I probably wouldn't have gone travelling around Southeast Asia. I probably wouldn't have gone out and enjoyed myself. I might not have met my wife.
What is retirement ultimately? What does it look like? It's not something where people one day down tools at the factory and they clock out and that's it, you're done.
Longer career, a happier career, that will be, there's a high chance that's going to be better for you in the long run.
I aim for my 10-year horizon and then within 3 years reevaluate and see where I'm at.
There's a whole movement in government at the moment of working out this conundrum of how we encourage people, or not just encourage, but allow those even who want to work longer.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Mouthy Money Podcast. My name is Edmund Greaves and I'm the editor of Mouthy Money. I am joined as ever by my good co-host Chris Chu, who's Head of Consumer Finance at Communications Consultancy MRM. We're here to talk about something, quite a big picture topic today, but I think it's something that's interesting. It's quite a sort of internet phenomenon, and that is the FIRE movement. Chris, do you know what the FIRE movement, what does FIRE stand for? Do you know?
I do. I think, is it financial independence, retire early?
That's right, yeah. Financial independence, retire early. Now, it's a kind of a growing, well, it has been growing for some time now. We've joined today by a guest who wants to challenge some of the wisdom of that FIRE movement a little bit. Perhaps that's the charitable way of framing it. So we're joined today by Andrew Oxlade, who is a director at Fidelity International, which is a big investment company and a UK investment platform. Andrew, hello, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me join. Delighted to be here.
Pleasure to have you on. Andrew, just give us just tell us a bit about yourself. What's your background? What brought you to talking about the FIRE movement with us today?
So I've worked in the investment industry for about the last decade, and previous to that, I was a journalist. So I worked as headed up personal finance at the Telegraph, and before that, headed up the online finance at the Mail with This Is Money. Yes, and many years ago, I worked at the FT. So it's investment is my thing.
So let's talk about the FIRE movement now. Mouthy Money in the past, we did actually have a commentator who used to write a bit about her own experiences on the FIRE movement on Mouthy Money, but we haven't really touched on the subject in a long time. Let's just understand what the FIRE movement is first, Andrew. Tell us just give us a bit of a breakdown of what it is and kind of how it came about, because it's quite interesting where it's a very internet online thing, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, I mean there's a bit of history to it. I remember it was around 2007, 2008 that it really began to take off. And it was very much a kind of American-led thing. I think just born out of that. And perhaps it was, that the great financial crisis of that period that sort of spurred more of the sort of enthusiasm around giving people more control around their finances. And that's what it's about. It's about people giving themselves the option to be able to retire much earlier than would be the traditional retirement age, but doing it through what some might call pain, extreme pain for some, as in they go hell for fire to try and save everything they possibly can. I mean, up to the extremes of sort of 70% of income. And then live enormously frugally to try and enable that. And then the money all gets saved away in the most tax efficient ways, hoping that they will have the options, therefore, to retire early. Now, in the UK, it's less of a movement, but I have noticed, I did do some Google Trends searching on this, and it was colossal in the US throughout that era and grew and grew and grew. And it's probably tailed off a little bit in the last few years, but has actually been growing again in the UK. So there's definitely still interest in doing this. It's appealing, isn't it, right? We all, there's a common aspiration to be able to retire early. I think most people are thinking, I'd like to retire or have the option to retire at the earliest possible retirement age, i.e. access to your pension age, which is your private pension, which is 55, and will rise to 57 in the next few years. The FIRE movement, it can be a lot earlier. I mean, some of these guys are really going for it and hoping to retire in their 40s, some of them even in their 30s. Now, of course, in the UK, you wouldn't be able to do that with a pension because you can't get that access, but you could do it with ISAs. So you could save money into ISAs with that to give yourself that kind of optionality. Which, I applaud the enthusiasm for saving and investing because it's very, very important and for looking out for your future. I challenge slightly the level of enthusiasm that's sometimes applied.
Yeah. I think from looking at it from the outside in, that's always been the thing that's made, because I'm quite like that with my finances where, as much as I understand, okay, well, if you save every single penny and then you don't have to work when you're, 45 or whatever, if you're starting, right out of when you're a graduate, perhaps, it seems an interesting idea, but actually I quite like to enjoy some of my life as well and not just be miserable while I get to 45 and then realize I've kind of just sold myself down the river for 20 years. Chris, I know you're a bit more of a saver than I am. So have you ever dabbled with the idea of FIRE?
So I describe myself more of a financial tortoise than a financial hare. So, I'm going to just plod along with my plan was the way I would look at it. Let me take you back to summer last year though, and Wembley Stadium. And I was at the Oasis gig there. I'd had a few light refreshments and I was tapped on the shoulder by somebody who looked a lot fresher faced and younger than me at the gig. And he asked me to take a picture of him and his friends. And I said, yeah, no problem at all, assuming they were just very excited about the fact that they were at the Oasis gig. And he said to me, I've retired today. And I was like, what? Sorry, how? What? Brain completely scrambled. What do you mean? And turned out he was one of these FIRE individuals who had, obviously his big celebration was paying over the odds for Oasis tickets and going there. And then this was the start of his retirement. So it turns out he was like 5 years younger than me. I have to admit, I was in sort of play mode rather than work mode. So I gave it a bit of a thought and then sort of stepped away from it. But then on reflection, I was kind of thinking, really? Like, you're in your late 30s and that's it for you now? And I actually wish I'd asked him a few more questions about how he got there. For me, and maybe this is it, I went to an Oasis gig just to stretch that analogy a bit further when I was 18, 19. And if I'd have followed his lead based on what we're talking about here, I probably wouldn't have gone to that. I probably wouldn't have gone traveling around Southeast Asia. I probably wouldn't have gone out and enjoyed myself. I might not have met my wife. So I'm a bit like you, Ed. I think, well, look, it's all about a balance between, present and future you. And so I try and strike a balance every month with that and make sure that I'm not forgetting it. That said, and I know you said you don't want to be miserable, I do get a kick out of saving, knowing that I'm doing it. I do get, and the older I get, the more sort of the endorphins spike when I put money in my ISA or my pension. So, as I get older, perhaps I can see the benefit of it as I'm looking at a longer time horizon. But no, I think I'm going to be retiring at a more traditional age. And actually, I've got quite a longer term mortgage than compared to others. So there's, it's just under 30 years left on that. So on that horizon, I'm working into my late 60s and up to 70 really. So there might be some, paying that off earlier that needs to happen and ways to balance that. But so to answer your question, no, I don't think so. I think I'd rather just take it month by month. Financial tortoise, not a hare. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Andrew, I'm sure you have a view on this, but I think one of the most powerful things an investor or anybody can have really is when they've got time on their side, right? That kind of messaging of, the earlier you start doing this and saving properly for that end goal of retirement. I find the framing around retirement quite interesting because it doesn't you'd have to retire, right? You could quit the day job and do what you love and earn a low income, if you want to go be a librarian or something instead of having to work in a corporate job, or you want to keep chickens. Those are all kind of admirable goals. It's kind of have the independence to do what I really want to do with my life instead of having to do something that I'm not that interested in. I do find that idea quite alluring. I think my own personal experience, though, I kind of never really had the opportunity, mainly because actually when I was a relatively fresh graduate, and I had a bit of money saved, I had a conversation with an advisor, and this is a bit of the kind of the boogeyman in my personal finance history, who once told me not to bother saving my money into a pension, that it was a waste of time before I was 30, which, looking back on that now, seems like the most extraordinary piece of information anybody ever told me. It was just absolutely terrible. Do you think, I mean, that point around time, right, that's really important part of the FIRE thing. If you're 40 years old, thinking of in terms of FIRE is perhaps not the right way of framing it, right? How valuable is that time in getting started early?
Well, it certainly gets harder as you get older, doesn't it? Because you lose that, the power of compounding, which is the kind of earning returns on your returns, which if you're starting in your, sort of mid-20s, then you've got a massive advantage of the way that will scale up over time. But that's not to say you shouldn't be doing it at 40, because of course, if you're, there's 2 points to make around that. Is you probably have 20 years left, and that is a long time for compounding to work and have a powerful effect. But also, in the modern pension system, the chances are your money will remain invested long after you're retired and will be providing an income. And therefore, you still get that benefit, because your money invested at 40 will probably still be invested in 40 years' time, if not 50 years' time. So that it works on every level. But yes, I mean, if you can start younger, we all kind of wish we'd done more when we were younger. I mean, I did start when I was about 24, 25. I've always been a bit of a investment swot. And it was tiny amounts. I mean, literally, I think it was £45 a month was my first pension contribution. But that has all chipped in over the years to make a difference to what I've got now.
I think there's you alluded to it a bit earlier as well, but I think there's a really interesting point here for anybody who's listening in or watching from the UK, from that practical perspective over, and this is something that I think has always been the case for me, is FIRE is perhaps not as practical an idea when we have much of our savings going into pensions, which, as you said, actually you can't touch that until you're in your 50s anyway. So there's a kind of a practical thing there, isn't there? In that might not be. I don't know. I'm not quite sure of the landscape in the US, but that perhaps makes it a bit easier. But in the UK, you have to use an ISA to do this, which you're not benefiting from what are extremely valuable tax reliefs that come through a pension, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it tends to be pension is the best place. So if you were ticking off the order, it's company pension first, because you normally get the uplift from you do get the uplift from the employer, and which can be more than just the minimum. So that's free money in effect. So by putting that in, you're getting something extra from your employer, and then yes, you get pension tax relief. So the money going into the pension isn't taxed as it would do normally with income tax, and particularly if you're higher rate or even additional rate taxpayer, is massively beneficial to be able to do that. And with an ISA, you don't. But of course, there's always this debate around pensions. So as you say, you've got the flexibility to take it earlier. You can also take it out and not pay tax on the way out, and you will pay tax probably, or you'll pay your marginal rate of tax on the pension money when it eventually comes out. So if you're retired and you haven't got any other income, it may be that it's not going to be huge amounts of tax, but there will be some tax on the way out. There won't with an ISA.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I've always liked about the ISA is it's that kind of simple product. There is more complexity coming in, but that's perhaps for a discussion for another day. Andrew, I know you have some cynicism towards FIRE, right? And we've kind of danced around it a little bit, because we've got the core concept there. It's save hard in your early years, then you get to enjoy the benefit sooner than you would otherwise. But you've got a bit of cynicism about that ultimately, haven't you?
Well, Chris has made one point of why it's negative, but I think there is a broader thing as well, which is, so yes, I mean, you want to be able to live your life, you need to be able to live your life. And the way we are living our lives these days, which is student debt and all these other sort of costs that we do face, very high property costs in the UK, et cetera, you can't necessarily prioritise this kind of crazy future saving. And actually, I think psychologically it's not helpful. It can lead to putting ourselves under huge amounts of pressure to try and do that. And for what it is something of a what people perceive as a silver bullet, I think, and they think that they're going to get to this point of retirement and then life is going to be better because they've retired and they've got this freedom. Whereas actually, if you look at a lot of the evidence, it shows that people are happier if they carry on working. They have better mental health. They have better engagement and purpose feeds into mental health and general well-being. And of course, it changes the sums dramatically if you're working for longer. Now, I'm not saying, I totally acknowledge there's lots of people out there who won't be able to do that because of ill health, because of the type of job that they do means you can't do that job, into your 60s. But for a massive amount of people, there is this option. And I just, all I'm trying to do is challenge the thinking. Anyway, I got into thinking about this and I was thinking about the acronym of FIRE and thinking, well, how would I badge that up for a different way of thinking? And I came up with, I must confess, with the help of Mrs. Oxlade as well. It was one Saturday morning breakfast time. We were discussing this, how you want to live your life, et cetera, et cetera. And it's career happiness inspires longer lives. Chill. So my anti-fire movement, as I wrote about this in the Daily Mail, and that was the headline it ended up with, which was my anti-fire movement. Now, I think that's quite grand. It's not quite a movement yet. I'm still working on that. So I've not necessarily got a huge army behind me in support of this, because of course it is counterintuitive. People are like, I don't want to, I'm looking forward to retiring and da-da-da. And I totally get that. What I'm challenging is if you can focus on giving yourself a longer career, a happier career, that will be, there's a high chance that's going to be better for you in the long run. And so by that, I mean things like, and this applies to every age. So it could be, say, my age, I'm 52, I'm looking at this sort of situation of, when would I retire now? I could start to think about whether that would be if I'm going to be early, 5 years, or maybe 10 years, or even 15 years, technically would be my correct, my state pension age will be 67. And, I think it's about trying to find a job that you love, trying to find a job where there's flexibility. And it could be at my age, trying to move into something that gives you that. So this could look like the kind of going to be, I don't know, I love gardening. So maybe one day I'll, try and retrain and become a gardener and do that for a bit longer than I ever would have done. But it applies if you're in your 20s or 30s, I think, this different way of thinking. So rather than when you're 30 thinking, oh God, I just need to save every penny so I can get out of this rat race, perhaps change the thinking so it's more about how can I angle and structure my savings and the way I'm living my life to give me this longevity. And that can come from thinking, well, do you know what? I'm going to have a flexibility fund. I'm going to have an optionality fund to give me options in my 40s or 50s so that I can take a career break. So I can take 2 years out to retrain, or 2 years out just to go traveling, just to give yourself longevity, knowing that you can then work longer because you're treating it, coming back to the hare and the tortoise analogy, treating it more like that. So you're not sort of trying to race through and get, achieve as much as possible, but actually being more thoughtful about what's going to give you that longevity into working longer. I was recently in it's really made me stop and think, and I'm going to be pen to paper on this. I was in Japan at the start of the year, and it's such a different culture there. And as you'd expect, obviously their longevity is much higher, as we all know. That they're a kind of test case for the rest of the Western world of what's going to happen, which is our populations are aging and we need people to work longer. Now, every cab I took in Japan, the cab driver you don't ask, do you, obviously, but every cab driver, well, there was one actually who did tell us, we were actually asking him how old his car was, trying to in Japanese, and then he told us how old he was, which was quite useful, and he was 80. And they've recently raised the age so that they can drive cabs up until they're 80. But basically all the cab drivers were clearly in their 70s. There wasn't one who wasn't. Our tour guides were people who have had, there's one lady in Tokyo, and she'd been working at an electric company for all her life, and given that up, and was now being a tour guide on a part-time basis, and loving her work, really enjoying it, and was clearly probably again at least in her 60s, if not 70s, and was planning to work for a lot longer. it's those kind of changes that I think can give you that longevity, and it can help change that mindset of, I just hate my work and I need to get out and there is a silver bullet that's going to cure all this, because the chances are that it's not. And I'll tell you what else I see is the message board forums on this, where you get people. So there's one, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's basically where people go and post pictures of themselves. Like, I'm retired a year ago, it's amazing, and I'm doing all these, look at these great things I'm doing. I've been to Dubai for the last 3 months and yada, yada. You've seen them. But I noticed that a good 1 in 5 of those, maybe 1 in 7, are people going, yeah, I'm really enjoying it, but do you know what? I am missing work a bit, or I'm missing a sense of doing something, and I'm thinking about going back, or I'm thinking of starting a new business, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what we do is underestimate how that feeling is going to be. I think that feeling is very strong in a lot of people. There is a cohort of people who are just, that's it, I'm done, I'm very happy to be out. But I think we don't recognize in ourselves that we're probably going to be one of those people who gets to the great retirement and find the golf course is actually a bit boring.
Yeah, I think this is a topic that, I mean, the waters run really deep on it, and I think, look, we you touched on it there with as a society, how do we evaluate what older people are doing later in life? And there is discussion around people working ever longer. And you look at, there's businesses like, the one that on the top of my head is like B&Q are really good with hiring older people, aren't they? That's always the one that's quite famous. But it does beg that question as well, is what is retirement ultimately? What does it look like? It's not something where people one day down tools at the factory and they clock out and that's it, you're done, sort of thing. It doesn't work like that anymore, and it's not going to work like that into the future, and people need to be aware of that and factor into how they plan their long-term finances. I mean, I don't know if either of you've got ideas in your head of what your own retirements look like. Chris, I'm going to ask you first. Do you have an idea of what your retirement looks like?
Not yet, do you know what? There's a few things, and this is not fully formed. I was thinking about what I could do as when I'm older to kind of supplement my income, because of exactly what you said, Andrew, which is that structure piece, right? So I like to write creatively, but there's not a lot of money in that. So that's something I'll do just as a labor of love. But, I like sport. So it's like, is there a way for me to, work at a stadium? I've seen plenty of people when I've gone there who are in their sort of 60s and 70s who obviously do like Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday kind of thing, and get paid a little bit of money off the back of that. I remember listening to and I think your analogy there about sort of making sure that you have optionality is important. And I was thinking, who does this kind of sprint approach apply to? And I listened to an interview about 3 years ago with a retired, in inverted commas, former Irish international rugby player. I can't remember whose name it is at the moment, so apologies. But he said he was talking to his father, and due to injury, he'd had to retire earlier. And, rugby players don't make as much as footballers, right? But he was living quite a comfortable life. And he said the one thing that his dad said to him when, you've been sprinting since you were 12 to get into the team and work at full tilt, all the rest of it. He says, what you need to understand now for the next 30 odd years is this is a marathon, and you might have to stop occasionally and refresh and think about where you need to go. And he said that absolutely reframed the whole post rugby picture for him and made him start thinking about what he needed to do. So I see it as a marathon, Ed. I see it as, I might want to stop and have a little detour. I might want to go and think about doing something else or see something else, and you can't be too prescriptive about that. I don't have this idea of like, I'm going to get to 65 or 70 and this is what it looks like. I think we had a guest on the podcast in the past who said you can plan for 10 years, but in reality, it's every 3 years the situation is going to change. And so your point, Andrew, around optionality around that is helpful. So I aim for my 10-year horizon, and then within 3 years, reevaluate and see where I'm at. But you can guarantee if I've done the things that mean that I'm doing the right thing for 10 years, that in 3 years' time, my situation is going to be better. So I sort of work on that basis, Ed, which is new information is always coming in. So I don't know what my retirement is going to look like really, other than I might do a bit of writing. I like to travel a bit, and you might see me at a stadium checking your ticket. That's it, really.
You're one of those guys pretending to do bag searches out.
Yeah, do you know what? That's kind of what inspired me. I can wave my hands over somebody and not actually touch them. That sounds perfect. Okay.
You live right down the road from Spurs, right? Don't you? So
I do. Perfect. I live very close to there, so I might knock on the door and get my CV in about 20 years in advance. I'm not a Spurs fan, I hasten to add, everybody, but there we go.
You're being very optimistic here, Chris, because we know that the robots are going to be doing it in 20 years' time. There's
there is that. Yeah, that's what I'm mostly worried about. It might get rid of my stewarding job. Yeah.
it's going to take your job. I'm sorry. I'll just burst
Right.
that bubble for you immediately. My own. I have a really clear idea of what I want to do, and the thing I like about that is I don't set an age against it. I set a number in my head of what I think I can do to take it, and I periodically do things like adding the numbers up of how that will work. And actually, it's a dream I share with my wife, which is very convenient, I guess is the right word for it. One day we'd like to own a bookshop and just about break even selling books.
Amazing.
Just do that. Yeah. That's what
Can I just add to my retirement picture is I'm going to come down to your bookshop and buy some books. That sounds great.
You're welcome. More than welcome. I'll give you 10% discount on everything.
10. Unbelievable. How long have we worked together?
You can come do your poetry readings, Chris. We'll have authors and it'll be lovely.
Thank you. That'd be great. That'd be great.
That's my plan. It's very clear. And the thing with that is I don't think, okay, when I turn 60, I'm going to buy a bookshop. For me, it's looking at what I've saved and how much we've built up, and at what point could I do that and not be just drowning in the finances of it, kind of thing, where we could just live and break even on it or whatever, and just make it a life, or call it like a lifestyle business, I guess. I don't know. Just something I could just see myself. I just love. I mean, I've got them all behind me here. I just love books, and I just love being around them. If I can help share that knowledge with the world, and
why am I thinking of black books here, Ed? Are you going to end up like that character? You seen that?
What character?
Dylan Moran's character. Let's not go down this rabbit hole.
Oh, I don't know.
Hard drinking bookshop owner. Anyway, sorry. Look it up, people. Yeah, there we go.
Andrew, sorry, you've been sitting patiently while we wax lyrical there. What about you? Have you got? I mean, what do you? Obviously, you're not a Fire fan. You want to enjoy what you do, but what do you think about the future for the future?
Well, I think it's important. I mean, one option. So I hear you on those, and my equivalent of that is the gardening one, because I love gardening. And if I was going to do that, I'd want to do it properly. I'd want to go and do a course and be qualified and do it that way. But I think ultimately, you spend a lot of time building up skills, and being able to continue to use those skills, but perhaps in a different guise and in a more flexible way, is probably the most financially beneficial, balanced with getting, maintaining purpose and connection with people and I mean, working in the world of investment in Fidelity alongside some very clever people is enjoyable. So, extending that as long as I possibly can. I have 2 colleagues in my team who are both in their 60s and working part-time. And I think that's going to become much more common as an option for people, as in employers being more flexible. I can't tell you, I work I'm a trustee, as in a charity trustee for the International Longevity Centre, and they in particular, I see a lot of their work that they're doing in terms of trying to push this stuff on the agenda, and it's pushing at an open door. We had the Charlie Mayfield stuff last year on, keeping people in work longer, that report. There's a whole movement in government at the moment of working out this conundrum of how we encourage people, or not just encourage, but allow those even who want to work longer. Because you do still hear of these sort of horror stories of people who fall out of work at my age and then really struggle to find another job because employers shut down to that. And that is extremely damaging for the economy. Enormous amounts of people who could want to work and could be working and paying tax, unable to find the right sort of work. So I think we'll see a shift that means it will be easier to carry on doing the thing that you love for longer and probably on a more flexible basis. It's useful to be able to maintain the sort of industry ties that you've got and all of those sort of things. But a lot of this is still about connection, isn't it? It's about sort of knowing these people. But I don't know. I'd love to blend it with something where it is doing more of, say, the charity stuff for the ILC, or doing other things in that mix, but not spending quite so much time in an office environment. I probably would say would be my best balance.
I think that seems eminently sensible, and I think that's such an important point there about and this is big picture. Normal people will do what they can, but the government should have its eye on this, right? Encouraging businesses to help people stay in employment, in the economy. If for nothing else, we look at the debates around things like state pension. We look at stuff around people who kind of come out of work and then never go back to it. How can we encourage those people to have gainful employment, but one that also helps them have purpose? I think that's such an important big topic as well. perhaps too big for today's episode. But it's one of those ones, isn't it, where you peel the onion back and there's just more and more layers to it.
Yeah. I mean, an important thread of that debate is the fact that pensions are going to come later, state pension going to come later, and so therefore, again, people's mindsets need to change around their expectation of that. As in, I mean, the state pension now is much more generous, obviously, than it used to be because of the triple lock, and but it's for me it will be 67. It may be because there's a review going on this year. It may be that it will be 68 for me because at the moment it's mid 2040s that it would change to 68, but that may be brought forward. That's what previous recommendation was that wasn't adopted or hasn't been yet, but that may yet happen. And that's another thing for people to think about is that, the 55 that we'll sort of aspire to and think of, I think is a lot hooked around that's when the pension access age is. Now that's also going to be rising. Whereas actually the reality is that we're all working and we're all living far longer. We're actually having longer, healthier lives as well. But there's a lag. There's a lag in how our mindset is changing.
Yeah, 55 just seems pie in the sky, and has done for a long time to me. Pie in the sky as a retirement age. It's like, no way. It's nice to be able to access tax-free cash if I need it at that point, if I can. But actually, with my personal pension kind of thing, with my SIP, but actually, minimum for me, it's like at least another 5-10 years on top of that before I'd even seriously consider it. But for all the reasons we've outlined in this, so.
I mean, it's that change of culture, I think, that just seems so hard to achieve, doesn't it? To change a mindset like that is changing the culture of. So I mean, you're an example of a more sensible approach of understanding that 55 isn't possible, but for lots of people it's not, and they do hang on to that, and also just this sort of mindset change of that work is good. I really noticed it in Japan, actually. You do notice that they just love their work. They're so professional. Everything is done so well. When you get on the bullet train, the guards are so efficient at getting you on there. And when you go off, they stand there with a banner waving you off. Do you know what I mean? They love their work. They love their work. And trying to get that as a kind of more of a, I just have to do this rat racing and get through it and then get to the good stuff is the change in attitude that tends to come. We've got a survey, actually, that we did a few months ago. It's a global one, but there's a UK segment of it that measures this kind of stuff of why people think they may work longer. And it does give me hope. The highest result, so the reason people would consider working longer is because of sense of purpose. 57% of people say that I'll do it because it'd be a sense of purpose, whereas it's only 40% doing it because they have to financially. So it's positive in that people are beginning to understand, I think, that work is purpose and not just money.
On the Japan chain thing, sorry, just to back you up on that, when I was there, the guards, when the door would open, would bow to the carriage before they.
Well, that's right. They do. Yes, totally.
Can you imagine someone doing that on a Great North Western train in the UK? It just wouldn't happen. I was blown away by that. So, but the seriousness that they put into the role and the representation that they put, I was just like, wow, yeah. So I could definitely see that myself, Andrew. I completely understand that, and it's it adds more depth and meaning to what you're doing if you take it that seriously and that to heart.
So I think we're really keen to hear from anybody who's followed along today. Your views on FIRE. You're super pro FIRE. Are you more of a chill like Andrew? Very keen. And we know it's quite an emotive subject. People have their own ways of going about as well. So if you're trying to do it, we'd love to hear from you.
What if you're in between it?
You're doing
lukewarm water, like spinal tap.
I don't know. We're gonna have to find an acronym, Chris. We'll have to think about that. Go away and ask our respective wives, because they probably help.
Yeah, I'll ask. They come up with all the good ideas.
With that, I'm going to say thank you both. Andrew, thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
And Chris, thanks as ever for being my able co-host.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody. We shall see you all very soon. So with that, I shall say thank you and goodbye.